It was February of 2011. I was laying in a bed, unable to walk, unable to work, had no idea if I'd ever be able to attract a partner if I couldn't walk, no idea if I'd ever walk down the aisle with a daughter, no idea if I'd ever kick a soccer ball again. I was 28 years old. I never in a million years would have imagined I'd go from varsity athlete, top 20 under 30 in my city, to being unable to bathe myself. It was a major, major reality check. How did I arrive there? I ended up there. That's really me. Look at that hair. Look at that hair. This is 2008. I was a keen real estate investor. I'd raised a few $100,000. I had 3 properties on my belt, about to get my 4th. But even better, not only was I going to get rich, I was also going to get famous. Because I was a touring drummer. How about that? That's also my real hair. In a series of events I never could have predicted, my life turned upside down. Number 1, my band broke up right before we went on stage at the Western Canadian Music Awards. The real estate market crash happened. I lost $250,000, mostly of other people's money. And my main mentor, who I totally idolized, it turns out he was the lead promoter of a $12 million Ponzi scheme. The guy who owned this scheme ended up getting convicted in court, given a $250,000 fine, barred from holding securities for 25 years. This is like the stuff of movies. And all of that happened in about an 18-month window. A little stressful. You add on top of that I was working 80 to 100-hour work weeks, and it's not stress plus exhaustion, it's stress multiplied by exhaustion. Here, I never ever thought it could happen to me. But on December the 26th, 2010, I went to pick up my family, my mom, my dad, my brother, my sister, from their home, go take them Boxing Day shopping in Canada. And it's a little cold in Canada, and getting a parking spot at West Edmonton Mall is very difficult, so I thought I'd be the good son, pick everyone up, and Christmas miracle, drop them off at the door while I find the parking spot. As I walked to my parents' house, though, my mom noticed I had a bit of a limp. She's like, "Are you okay?" So she rolled up one pant leg, we took a look, and it looked like I'd rolled my ankle playing basketball. We rolled up the other pant leg, sure enough, it was swollen too. Unbeknownst to me, I developed a condition called erythema nodosum, very, very rare. There was no therapy at the time. I couldn't go to physiotherapists. There was no medication. 3 doctors, all independent of each other, said, "You just need bed rest." And I said, "For how long?" They said, "You just need bed rest." There was no timeline. So this is my healthy foot. I'm sorry for bringing it so personal so quickly here. This is my foot, not so healthy. Within 5 days, I went from walking around to being flat on my back, and I had to pick between sitting on a plastic little bench in the shower to bathe myself, or to have my mother give me a sponge bath in bed at age 28. My days were a mix of resentment for what had happened to me, to feeling totally humiliated. Every one of my worst fears had come true. I'd lost the money, I'd lost the band, I'd lost the houses, I'd lost my reputation, lost everything. And it had not been for the love of my family, I don't know if I would have been able to go on. There was just no way out. So there was this moment in February of 2011, which is the 2nd month of my illness, where I met whatever you want to call the divine, the universe, God, or whatever your persuasion is. And I woke up and I felt a tingling in my body, and I felt the warmth. And then I heard a voice, and that voice said, "Is this really what you want?" And I don't know if a second went by, or a minute went by, or an hour went by, because time stood still. And then I heard another voice. It was a voice that was tiny. It was weak. It was buried in the corner of my soul. But it was clear. It said yes. And I knew that that was the moment that I started to heal. Because the very next wave that came through me was a wave of realizations. I realized that I'd been chasing fame and fortune through rock and roll and real estate when what I needed to be chasing was truth and mastery. And even if I never became rich, never became famous, if all I got was to be 1% better with every week that went by, that would be a life very, very well lived. There's a great line in the Bhagavad Gita, ancient Sanskrit. It says, "To the work you are entitled, but not the fruits thereof." Not the fruits thereof. So truth and mastery became my North Star. And I also became a pretty big advocate for working a little smarter than I'd been working up until that point, and learning how to be a great leader from a teammate perspective rather than trying to brute force everything myself. Now I'm going to imagine a lot of you here, myself included, we probably really got to where we are sitting in this chair, these chairs at Yale today, by working really hard and being really smart. At some point, that doesn't work anymore. You can only pedal the bike so fast before at some point you need to change vehicles. Now, what happens if I go from pedaling right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left on a bicycle, and then I get into a car and I start pedaling right, left, right, left, right, left on the car's pedals? I'm going to injure myself, I'm going to ruin the car, and I'm not going to get anywhere. So I'm here to invite you to graduate up from the bicycle to the car, or if you're already at the car, let's go to the jet, whatever floats your boat. And I'm going to share with you the three-part methodology I learned and developed just from studying and from trial and error. Soon after I could walk again, after failing 5 times with assistance, I finally cracked the code on that. That was 11 years ago. And I now have a company. We've actually hired over 800 executive assistants for entrepreneurs across the US and Canada. So we learned a lot from working with a ton of entrepreneurs, almost 1,000 entrepreneurs. And even that aside, just my own journey, it's been 11 years. And I can tell you what I've taught you here is from the front lines of 11 years of practice. And I'm always getting better. So today we're going to cover 3 parts. We're going to cover the time freedom mindset. We're going to cover something called the delegation cycle. Then we're going to cover something called the trust tactics. The time freedom mindset, as I've come to understand it, is that ultimately, every one of you, you are the number one asset. I thought money was the top asset. I thought customers were the top asset. I thought investors were the top asset. Well, I had all those, and I lost all of those. And then it dawned on me, I'm not dead. And as long as I am here, and I keep showing up every single day, as humble as the step might be, and sometimes it wasn't even a step for me. Sometimes it was like rolling over and opening a laptop. As long as I kept myself in the game, I could come back. And it took me a lot of years, but I paid off every single investor. I came back with my health and stayed in the game as an entrepreneur. It was close, guys. It was very, very close. But as long as that pilot light, that flame inside, always stayed alive, I could always come back, and I have. And I believe probably all of us will lose it all at least once in this room, maybe twice. Keep that flame alive. If you remember nothing else from this talk and you wanted to leave right now, that would be it right there. It's because you are the number one asset. Now, I was the drummer once upon a time. I've had people want my autographs. I've been in the media. I was actually in a car once with my girlfriend at the time. She was like, we just started dating. She's like, are you guys really a good band or not? I was like, I don't know. You tell me. She said, well, like, could I request you on the radio? I was like, thinking the town we were in at the moment, I was like, there's only 8 radio stations that played us. So I was like, is this one of them? Yes, it was. So she called, requested my band, and my band's song played in her car radio just like 5 minutes later. I was like, yes, rock star, let's go. So I've been that guy who gets treated really specially everywhere and special treatment. That's not the kind of number one asset I'm talking about here. I'm not saying treat yourself as the diva. I'm actually saying it's the polar opposite. I'm saying take that triangle with you at the very top, flip it upside down. You are at the service, at the foundation. You are the cornerstone of everything that comes above. That's the kind of servant leadership I'm talking about. And that's what I found to work far better, far, far better as a mindset than the opposite. We already talked about the petals. I love this book. If you're looking for a reading recommendation, Who Not How. Oftentimes we get really good at business and life by knowing what to do, how to do it. This book proposes we ask a different question. Who should do it? Oftentimes you don't even stop to ask that question, okay? I love this quote also from Tim Ferriss. He says, for the big things to go right, you need to be okay with some small things going wrong. Does my EA make the odd mistake? Yes. But it also means because I let her do what she does, she manages my inbox, I handle fewer than 10 emails per week. Per week. Does she make the odd mistake? Yes. But a few small things going wrong totally unlocks me to focus on writing a book. Coming from Austin to New Haven to come to Yale to be with you today. That wasn't going to happen if I needed to micromanage every single little detail. Okay? The three-part model to think about: eliminate, automate, delegate. If anyone has ever heard of Tim Ferriss, this is his idea. I'm Tim Francis, not Tim Ferriss. I once hosted a dinner party in Austin, and this very successful rocket scientist, literally NASA rocket scientist, who had an aerospace company as well, came to the dinner, and he's like, it's getting closer to dinner. He's getting more and more nervous. And I'm like, is everything okay? He's like, yeah, well, when is Tim Ferriss coming? And I was like, oh, I'm Tim Francis. Yeah. We've been friends ever since. It's all good. Okay, so let's say you've got this massive to-do list. You're feeling overwhelmed. Your business is growing. You got to do everything from raising money, if that's what you're doing. You got staff to think about. You got product development. There's so much to do. The first step is not, how do I find someone to do this for me? In fact, it's not even, how do I get ChatGPT to do this for me? The very first step is to say, does this need to be done at all? My business, when I came out of being sick, was a marketing agency, a digital marketing agency. We did everything from websites to pay-per-click ads, landing pages, Google Analytics, that kind of thing. And I'd had a marketing agency mentor who told me, you got to send a report every 2 weeks to your clients. That's what helps them stay on board, helps with that monthly recurring revenue. You got to do it. So that was good until I had a lot of clients, and then now I got a lot of reports to write, and that was a real drag. So I'm thinking eliminate, automate, delegate, and it dawns on me, wait, I don't know if my clients even read these things. So I messaged my clients, and sure enough, 2 of them said, oh no, we just trust you implicitly. We never read the report. We don't even open the email. Whatever you want to do, just go for it. You've got our credit card. If something's bad, we trust you'll let us know. I was like, well, I'm sure glad I didn't automate or delegate that, because then I would just be paying someone else to do something that was unnecessary. So the first question, we've got an overwhelming list of tasks, is actually, what can I eliminate? Okay. Second step is to say, how can I automate? That could be through forms, that could be through Zapier, that could be some other tech tools, certainly GPTs, including custom GPTs. I've written a bunch of them. They're absolutely phenomenal. I'll even share one with you later today that will help you delegate faster than ever. Okay. So automate is the second part. And then the third part is to delegate. That's when someone else does it for you. And I'm going to give you a really cool method I developed over the years called 360 delegation. More on that. Hang tight. We do have to touch on the 80-20 rule. Everyone's heard of the 80-20 rule, I'm sure. Pareto principle. Yeah, it's just the idea that like 20% of inputs generate 80% of the outputs. 20% of income is held by 80%. It's actually probably more than that at this point. 20% of roads handle 80% of the traffic. And I bet 20% or less of the people in your life generate 80% of your stress. A nervous giggle fills the room, right? Now, there's a different version of the 80-20 rule. Different version of the 80-20 rule. This is called Hourglass. An entrepreneur named Mike Rhodes taught this to me. And it's actually 10-80-10. So it's 80-20, but it's split up differently. And what it reveals is that the beginning of any project, task, campaign, raise, anything you're doing, the first 10% is quite intellectually difficult. A lot of decision burden. That's why it's really wide at the top. But it doesn't last all that long. Like if I'm trying to go to Hawaii, it's kind of a lot of work maybe in the beginning to figure out which island and where we're going to fly and what's the itinerary and who's coming. But that might only be 5-6 hours of work. The actual trip itself is like 7 days, right? So that brings us to the middle 80%, which is actually doing the thing, whatever that might be. And then the last 10% is reviewing the work. So it breaks down like this: lead, do, review. Lead, do, review. 10, 80, 10. Where I want you to be as much as possible is in the first 10 and the last 10. If someone's working 80 hours a week, there's probably a lot of middle 80% in there that we got to think about, how can we get this off of our plates, okay? I don't want to see you give up the first 10 or the last 10 until you hire a more senior person who then they're kind of like the surgeon in the room. I'll talk about that in a moment. And they can offer the thought leadership, the expertise, the experience, et cetera, to be doing the leading and the reviewing, okay? Lead, do, review. There's that tool, 360 Delegation. That is how you properly lead the work, and I'll teach that to you in just a few minutes. Okay, I'm not suggesting you do this exercise now. I would say this is a good take-home writer-downer. Do a time study. Very simply, we don't have to make this complicated. It can just be an Excel or Google Sheets spreadsheet. 8 o'clock, 8:15, 8:30, 8:40, 9, just time of day. What are you doing in each of those 15-minute increments? I wouldn't even worry about putting everything that's in that increment. I would just put, what are you doing at the moment of 8 o'clock, at the moment of 8:15, at the moment of 8:30? I would include 2 parts. I would include, what is the context that you're in? Am I in the context of a meeting? Am I in a context called my email inbox? Am I in the context called on a plane or in a car? Then from there, what's the activity happening in the context? So I am in a meeting and I am talking to an investor. I am in a car. I am driving to the attorney's office, something like that. Build that time study, and then part 2 comes where we now say, what can we eliminate, automate, or delegate? That's how you can take what you're learning right now into your real life, like today, okay? So let's talk about leading the work some more. Instead of doing the work, let's talk about leading the work. This is called the delegation cycle. Delegation cycle has 3 parts: define, design, and delegate. Define, design, and delegate. You're going to see this everywhere: in marketing, in sales, in finance, in HR, in legal. It's everywhere. You can just do this over and over again. My days, these days, are largely spent doing this: define, designing, delegating. What do we got to do next? If I'm kind of like the adventurer going into the wild, figuring out, you know, what kind of booby traps are out there, and you know, what kind of provisions do I need, water and food and weapons, like I'm out there figuring out what we need next for the next part of the business. So I do a lot of that. I also do a lot of being the spokesperson for my company as well, thought leadership and whatnot. This is something you're probably never going to fully get rid of. Define, design, delegate. It's something you might give to a senior person as you start hiring more and more senior people. I have senior people doing that in my company. But it's something to know intimately. Okay, so what does it mean to define? What exactly is the task size, scope, difficulty, frequency, timeline? What user stories do we want to accomplish? What's the definition of done? Okay. Any Scrum fans in here? Yes? Yeah, I got a few smiles. Okay. I got Scrum certified. Even though I'm not a software guy, it's just such a brilliant way to organize work. It's a great product development method. Okay, so that's kind of like, what are we doing here? Am I going to Hawaii? Am I going to Chicago? Is it a 7-day trip? What are we doing here? In here, I want you to think about what parts of the work is surgeon in the room. Now, what does a surgeon do in an operating room? They actually do 3 things and 3 things only. They do strategy. What is the procedure we're going to use to address this injury or this illness? So strategy. The second thing they do is high-level skill. They do the incision. The third thing that they do is high-level access. So only the surgeon has a medical license that allows them to do certain things and sign certain documents. Only the surgeon has high-level access to other surgeons. I'm going to guess if like the finance manager of the hospital tried to text a neighboring surgeon to say, can we get a second opinion on this x-ray? I mean, may or may not happen, but if the surgeon texts the surgeon, probably will get a second set of eyes on it over coffee or something like that, okay? So we've got strategy, high-level skill, and high-level access. This is the surgeon in the room part of any task, project, department, or entire business. This is what you want to keep doing. Everything else needs to be done by everyone else. That's the goal. Now, it's pretty tough to make this like a light switch. It's more like a dimmer switch where you just kind of hand off a couple items at a time. But this is the vision of where we want to get to, is strategy, high-level skill, high-level access. There's a model I developed that's called the 7 Yes test. Now, this is customized for delegating to an executive assistant. However, you can modify this, delegating to anyone on your team. The 7 questions for delegating to EAs is this task a $10 to $20 an hour task? Does it happen at least once per week? Is there room for error? Can one repetition be completed in 20 to 60 minutes? Does it require you to create minimal training, them to learn as little as possible, and are you already doing it? It's like hilarious to me when I see an entrepreneur say, well, I want to start a podcast. I'm going to buy a course on that and have my EA go study it. That is rarely going to work. That is rarely going to work. They don't have the access to resources that you do and the decision-making power and the direction, okay? Now, you would modify this if you're delegating to other people, but the idea is we're unpacking a task into a smaller piece. So let's say, for example, if you're to say, hey, I want like an email campaign that I'm going to send an email broadcast to promote our next big sale or to my group of investors or whatnot. Is an assistant really going to sit there and figure out how to write the copy and who should receive it and when we're going to send it and how often? No, that's you. That's you or your marketing director or your CMO, someone who's got that surgeon in the room skill set. So does that mean that an assistant can't help with anything when it comes to email marketing? Well, no, of course they can. If we split it up into surgeon in the room versus non-surgeon in the room, what are the strategy pieces? Who are we sending? What's the headline? That would be high-level skill. But basically like writing the copy. But then from there, an assistant can easily take that from you, and they can then turn around, go into your email marketing software, fight with the WYSIWYG editor, make sure that the bold stays bold and the hyperlink stays hyperlink, and send a practice test email to themselves and click through. So unpacking is oftentimes one of the biggest challenges.
And one of the things that you guys all have access to is venture associates. And so when Tim is saying assistants, it's really important to sometimes think about the venture associates as people who can act like an assistant. Sometimes they're more skilled or they might be subject matter experts, but in the way that you define and do all the things that he's talking about, this is a really good group of people to immediately think about.
Thank you. Great way to connect some dots. I love that. Now, on any of those 7 questions, if we ever bump into a no, like, well, no, it's not happening at least once per week, or, oh, no, that's not a low-risk task, et cetera, then there's 3 options. One, you can unpack the task into the pieces like I just gave you an example with email marketing. The second would be to add supervision. Would I be okay with my assistant sending a $10,000 wire somewhere if it's their first time and they've never done it before? I feel like, nah, maybe not so much. But you know what, if we were sharing a Zoom room and I could watch them do it and add that supervision, yeah, now I can delegate that. And so my assistant actually runs payroll for me. So it's tens of thousands of dollars every single month. And I watch her do it. She sets it all up, and then I just come in, watch her do it, and then I leave. So just unpack. Unpack is such a solve for so many of the delegation challenges you might have. So unpack, add supervision, or pick a different task. I created an AI tool, custom GPT at 7yestest.com. This is those 7 questions, but you can literally just put into the GPT, I want to delegate email marketing. And it'll ask you these 7 questions and go back and forth with you until you get the right size, difficulty, scope of task, okay? Now that is specifically for EAs. So if you're delegating to a higher level person, then $10 to $20 an hour is not gonna be the first question. It's gonna be like 50 to 100 or 50 to 500 maybe, even if it's like an attorney or something, okay? So we talked about define. We gotta define what is the right size and difficulty and duration of task. That's our define. Next we need to design. And then the third is going to be delegate. But let's talk about design first. This is where 360 delegation comes in. So I know the task that I'm going to have my teammate do. Now I need to support them in being successful at taking it on. There's management by abdication, and then there's management by delegation. Management by abdication is saying, well, here's my username and password. You go figure it out. Odds of that working, below 1%. Okay, yet it happens all the time across the world, really, and especially here in America. What's the alternative? Management by delegation, not abdication, but delegation. The model I invented is called 360 delegation. There's 3 parts to it: vision, resources, definition of done. Getting clear on the vision, getting clear on the resources, and getting clear on the definition of done. There's a AI tool I created here as well. It's at 360dwriter.com. It's probably not within our time scope today, but maybe during Q&A, if you want to see me run that once, I'd be more than happy to do it during Q&A if that feels right. Otherwise, I encourage you to go do it on your own. And in essence, you can just put any task in there. You can say, I want to delegate booking hotel rooms, and it will literally write the whole delegation. You can then copy that, paste it into a Google Doc, send that to a teammate. Or say it's a vendor that you're working with, like say it's a marketing company, and maybe you want them to create a new logo for you. Open up 360dwriter.com, write, make me a logo, and it'll come up with all that, and the GPT will actually ask you questions like, do you want it modern versus, right? So it'll really support you so that you don't end up with a boomerang task. Boomerang task is when you delegate it and it keeps coming back, either misperformed or it comes back properly done but in the wrong direction. We don't want boomerang tasks. So we've defined, we've designed, and now it's time to delegate. So a big part of delegation is actually delegating to the right person in the first place. I would say oftentimes, well, actually, I'll throw myself under the bus here. I failed with my first 5 assistants. Not a single success in there. And I reached a point where I was standing in front of the mirror and I realized, like a person who gets divorced 5 times, maybe I had something to do with it, right? And then I stepped into the shower and I had like the most incredible like download. I don't know if anyone else gets shower thoughts. I get lots of shower thoughts. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of heads nodding. And the question that floated into my mind was, if I was legally bound to staying with my next executive assistant for 3 years, can't fire them, can't reassign them, what would I do differently? Very quickly I realized, well, that certainly raises the bar on who I would hire, and that certainly also raises the bar on how I would lead. If you can't fire them for 3 years, right? I think this 3-year test, this 3-year question, what would have to be true if you're forced to keep them for 3 years, is a very good question to ask of almost anyone that you hire. Unless it's really specifically like a short-term project, like maybe you just need some code help or you need some design help or something. Obviously, that's a little bit different. But if we're talking an internal teammate, maybe they're a W-2, I mean, we want them aligned on purpose, mission, values, because it is just so expensive to hire the wrong person, okay? So let's assume that you've got the right kind of person. Once you've got them, and this is a careful word, so I ask your grace a little bit here. I actually think once I've got the right person, or at least I'm 70% sure that I've got the right person, at that point, I actually surrender. Whatever they need. Remember I told you we're going from being the rock star #1 asset to being the foundation #1 asset? This is one of those moments. To hire someone, even if you give them a nice 360 delegation, but you don't coach them, you never meet with them, you don't respond to them quickly on Slack, you leave them on an island, is not going to work. Is not going to work. So once we've got that teammate, we need to give them support. Look, you hired them. You hired them. It's kind of like making a baby. You make a baby, you got a baby. Don't matter if it's crying at 3 in the morning. You don't get to nudge your partner and say, oh, that's not my zone of genius. Okay? So now that you've given them their word, you've given them your word that I believe in you. You're the right person for the job. Now resource them. Resource them. That's what I mean by surrender. Okay? They need an extra 1-hour training with you. Great, let's do it. They need access to something. Great, let's do it. Right? Obviously within legal bounds and whatnot. Let me point out something. I skipped ahead a little bit. I think it's important to be at your team's service, but not without sacrificing your deep work time. I do not have an open door policy. If that's for you, more power to you. But I literally think that the journey of growing a company is actually about getting more and more and more deep work time. To not be in the weeds, battling the, hey, I need a username and password reset. Can you help me? Right? I want you to have more and more deep work. These days, I take no meetings with anyone on the entirety of Mondays. From morning until night, deep work the whole way through, every day till 10 a.m., Tuesday through Friday. Also no meetings, it's all deep work, deep work, deep work, deep work. Okay. All right. So exercise for you, if you'd like to make this real in your life, would be to create something called a delegation roadmap. I'll just show you a picture. This is a delegation roadmap. I did this for, it was a solo consultant who, I think he's making like 500 or 600K a year. So this was this person's delegation roadmap. You'll see in the first column here that we have, I call it assistant, then specialist type work, CEO spokesperson type work, and then maximum leverage type work. These are a little bit approximate, but this is like about $25 an hour work, 40 to 500, 100 to 500, and then $500 an hour plus. And then from there, we break it down into 3 parts that every business has. Doesn't matter whether you're a solo or you are Apple. It doesn't matter. You have sales and marketing or acquisition, not of funds, but acquisition of clients. Fulfillment is making good on the promises we made in sales and marketing. Then mothership, that's a Tim Francis term. Legal, finance, HR, back office type stuff. So in each of the 3 main functional units of a business, there's going to be work at each of these levels. At the lowest level, it might be something like rescheduling people who need to book with you, email inbox, calendar, that all needs to get delegated. And then from there, maximum leverage would be like relationships, going to in-person events, shaking hands, pressing palms with investors, with mentors, with peers, writing a book. Like these are all ultra high leverage type activities. Actually, tax strategy, as unsexy as that may sound, is really a high leverage task. It's the reason Apple has offices in Ireland. Yeah, okay. So I really encourage you to think through what does the value of your day look like. And as soon as you create a delegation roadmap, it's very clear. And guess what? Delegation roadmap can get built off of your time study, which you talked about. So start the time study, figure out what you can automate, eliminate, delegate, and then that builds out your delegation roadmap. Okay, so all this has, and maybe some of you have been feeling it, it's like, hey, this sounds great. I would love to have other people do my work for me. But then you go to delegate your email inbox, it's like, ugh, that's terrifying. Or, oh, you're going to give your passport to someone to book flights for you? Ugh. Or I'm going to give them my username and password to like Google Drive or something? Ugh. Terrifying, absolutely terrifying. So this is where trust tactics come in, the third part of our 3 parts today. So my team and I, we surveyed 147 entrepreneurs and we said, and keep in mind, we focus on executive assistants, but this is true across the board, any role. We said, what's your single biggest fear or frustration when it comes to hiring an executive assistant? I thought there'd be dozens and dozens of different replies. I was mistaken. There were only 6. 98.7% of entrepreneurs said one or many of these 6 issues. I don't know what to delegate. I don't want to train my assistant. I don't want to have to manage them. I don't know where to find them. I don't know how to trust or release control. And finally, I don't know where to find a great assistant. Of these 6, there's an 80-20. There is one of these items that far outstrips all others. Does anybody want to guess what the single, and it's like half of everyone had this concern. Any guesses?
I don't know what to delegate.
I don't know what to delegate. A lot of entrepreneurs do start with that, yeah? I don't know how to trust or release control. That was it. It was like 48 odd percent, 49%. Like half of everyone had that at least, or that and one of the other fears here. I get it. I understand. I mean, I've been in that position. When I first delegated my email inbox to my assistant 11 years ago, you would have sworn I was like an addict in remission. My hand was like shaking above the mouse to give her access. It was like I was getting chased by a grizzly bear, but here I was sitting at a warm desk in Canada, okay? So it's like we work hard to build our businesses. It is our butt on the line with investors. It's our butt on the line signing every single legal agreement. It's our butt on the line with clients if you're doing client-facing work. It is our butt on the line. In fact, I think the number one characteristic or quality that separates an entrepreneur from the people who work for an entrepreneur is not intelligence, is not work ethic, is not degrees or titles or certifications. In my personal opinion, there's probably some smarter person than me who came up with some research on this, but in my opinion, it's risk tolerance. Literally, I have people who work for me that are way smarter than me, way more industrious than me. But they wouldn't be willing to put up 100 grand of their money or an investor's money or something like that on the project. Not because they don't believe in it, but their personal risk tolerance just isn't there. That's okay. It takes all types. So we put our butts on the line, left, right, and center. You betcha we're going to be a little tight on the reins when it comes to delegating. So, does it mean we shouldn't delegate? No. I'm not an attorney, I'm not an accountant, I'm not an HR approved professional, so take that into mind. I'm just going to tell you what I've done to manage risk in my mind. There's no such thing in my mind as eliminating risk. I just want to take it from feeling like I'm jumping the Grand Canyon. I want to manage that risk down so that it feels like I'm jumping maybe a bicycle over a pool, and then I want to manage that down so it feels like I'm stepping over a sidewalk crack. You can still stub your toe, but if you do and you fall, you're only going to skin your knee, you're not going to kill yourself. Okay, risk management. So here are I love this quote. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Beautiful. We've probably all heard that before. Beautiful African proverb. Okay, so these are my risk management strategies. Non-disclosure agreement, criminal record checks, hire from a legal system that you understand and trust enough. For me, I tried going overseas to get an EA. I've been based in the US and Canada. And to me, I just couldn't shake the fear of I don't understand the legal system enough to be effective to chase someone down in the Philippines or India or Pakistan. For other roles, that's good. And if you're comfortable with it, great. Or you're part of an organization that's good with it, that's fine. For me, I just couldn't get there. So for me, I only hire EAs, similar, same time zone, language, and business culture. The second I do that, it solves so many of my headaches. Now, if I was in Australia, I would say the same thing. Similar, same time zone, language, business culture. So does that mean hiring in the US or Canada? No, it's not the same time zone, right? So if someone is in Australia, I'd say do Australia or New Zealand. That's similar, same time zone, language, business culture. If you're in a Latin American country and you have a Latin American business, then perfect. Similar, same time zone, language, business culture. Those three things, it just removes so much friction very, very quickly when it comes to an executive assistant. Now, different roles, obviously very, very different. And there are many more mechanisms these days coming out that provide more and more security to widen the world talent pool, but that's that. Okay, next up, you could start with a trial. I'm not big on saying, hey, I'm going to give this staff member a 30-day trial. It makes me tentative. It makes them tentative. Are we really in a relationship? Are we not? Right? Instead, I say, let's trial this task. Let's give that a spin. Also, if you pick tasks using the 7 Yes test, that also helps manage risk. If you delegate with the 360D writer, you can add supervision. If you have your assistant or teammate do a daily report, 4 questions you want to ask. What did you do today? Where did you get stuck? How can I help you? What are you doing tomorrow? Ask those 4 questions to people who report to you. Total game changer in terms of being able to help them and make them feel supported. And then also a great weekly meeting. Now, my assistant and I, we call it our WAM, our weekly alignment meeting. 2 final points here. Number 1, this is the fantasy that we all have when we're delegating. Fantasy is, oh, I'm just going to spend some money. I'm going to level up instantly. It's going to be great. It's going to be great. The reality is you're actually worse off. You're actually worse off in the beginning. They don't know how to do their job all that well. They don't know you. They don't know the acronyms or the product names or the workflows or the tools or whatnot. So they're going to be a net negative in the very, very beginning. Stick with it, though, and your new teammate will actually hit a break-even point where they're giving you back as much time as you put into them. Stick with them even longer, and they will actually not only meet the original dream expectations that you had, but they will surpass them. That happened for me about a year after getting my first ever legit right-hand executive assistant. Things were going really well, and I was feeling a little bold, and so with a little cheeky tone in my voice, I said, I want to try something called Freedom Week. She's like, what's Freedom Week? I said, I want to go off the grid for 8 days, no phone, no email, no text message, and see what breaks. She was like, okay, let's get ready for that. So we did that. I flew to New Girl, Jamaica, was on vacation. The only rule was I was not allowed to check my phone at all during the 8 days. 1 rule, that's it. I failed. I cracked. Day 4, the control freak in me was like, oh my God, I'm kicking down the door of the hotel room and open up the safe and pull out the phone and hold the phone up looking for a signal. And it's like, okay, no emergencies. Okay, so I kind of suspiciously put the phone back in, lock the safe. Day 8, I'm at the Montego Bay Airport in New Girl, Jamaica, and I'm next to New Girl, Jamaica, and I'm about to fly out. I'm like, okay, I'm allowed to turn it on again. Turn the phone on, put it to the sky, look for the signal. No emergencies. But this can't mean that's actually working. It must be just bad cell service. So now I'm even more stressed out because I'm out on a plane and can't use a cell phone. I get home, I open up my laptop just like this, and I'm doing one of these. I'm like, oh God, how many emails is it going to be, right? What's the welcome home avalanche going to be? I'm expecting 500 emails. There were just 18. Took me 2 hours. answered them all, and that's when I realized I'd gone on my first ever true vacation where I was not stressed out about my business the entire time. Okay? That's what surpassing expectations looks like. Now there is this little spot. Some of you have heard of a guy named Paul Graham from Y Combinator. He coined the term the trough of sorrow. That's for business scaling. I'm using it here in terms of time management and delegation. Use the tools that I've shared with you today, and you will shrink the trough of sorrow in depth, and you will shrink it in duration, and your life is going to get so much easier. I want to share my heart here before I flip it over to Q&A. We have one life to live. We are the number one asset in our businesses. And I sincerely hope that there's maybe one thing I've shared that allows you to fulfill your potential in this lifetime. I would hate for you to get to the pearly gates and have regrets. I sincerely believe that our life potential is right there for the taking. This is the best time to be alive. Do you realize that our standard of living right now is better than kings and queens from 400 years ago? They didn't have indoor plumbing. They didn't have electricity, okay? This is an amazing time to be alive. And I just don't know if we're going to fulfill our potential for burden our email inbox all day, okay? So with that, I do publish a newsletter. If you want to sign up, truthandmastery.com, it's free. And then on all social media, I'm at RealTimFrancis. I'm not good at social media. I mean, don't come trying to learn anything about social media technique. It's not good. But if you do feel compelled, you can come on over. With that, I'm willing to open up to Q&A. Justin, how much time would you like to set aside for Q&A?
We've got about 15 minutes. Yeah, 15 minutes or so.
Okay.
I can kick it off with a question. I think as student entrepreneurs, like this whole group is, it can feel like there are a lot of non-negotiables when it comes to school and the business. You're trying to manage all of that. Putting yourself into the mind of a student entrepreneur, what are some of those first tasks that might be delegatable?
Okay. Yes. So the question was, I'm juggling a lot of balls. I've got school commitments. I've got business aspirations. I'm trying to learn. What should I delegate first? Okay. So my actual answer to anyone of any age, any experience, anything is you're never going to have enough time. You're never going to find the time. We live in this fantasy land that I'm just going to find that, when I find the time, I'm going to go get whatever MBA, or I'm going to start this business, or I'm going to write that book. That's what we tell ourselves. I'm telling you, it's a fat lie. It is a big old fat lie. You will never, ever find the time to start that business, whatever it is, okay? It always comes down to making the time. I love the expression, you can have anything you want, but you can't have everything that you want. There are trade-offs to everything. I've been in 150 board meetings now, and a model I invented, I call it pro-CEO decision-making, is at the intersection of three factors is the right decision. The first is, what is my unique set of circumstances? The second is, what is my unique set of resources? And the third is, what is my unique timeline? So to answer your question, Justin, it depends, right? If you've got finals in 2 weeks, the decision's different than if finals is in 2 months, right? Different timeline. If you're someone who has a ton of venture money already, then your decisions are going to be different than if you don't have 2 pennies to scrape together, right? So I would think about resources, I would think about timeline, and I would think about circumstances in making that decision. Now, a low-hanging fruit one that I personally love, if we can delegate meals, I love that. For years, I've actually had meal delivery to my house, and that means I don't have to cook. It means I don't have to clean. It means I don't do very much grocery shopping. I save tons of time, and I've been doing that for years and years. Massive, massive time saver. Doesn't require any domain-specific expertise to do. It does cost a few dollars, though. So that'd be the one thing. Thank you for that. If you got to run, yeah, I don't know. Not a problem. No, not a problem. All right. Any other questions? Yes.
My name is Caleb. I'm a sophomore at Yale University that's currently trying to build something. And one of the things is that I do feel guilty when I am trying to find someone to delegate a task to, or to find a potential team member to join a venture that I'm working on, because I don't have any immediate sort of gratification to give them, because I don't have the resources to give them the $25 an hour, or I don't have that resources in like terms of connections or networking that they might be looking for in an actual like internship or work alternative that they could be pursuing. So how do I go about getting people to work with and to collaborate with and to delegate tasks to when they have such an easy alternative that's paid and more convenient and easier to do, I guess.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay. I think this is where skills and storytelling comes in, right? So first of all, if someone needs to make some money, they gotta, bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, food, clothes, shelter, mating. Like, I mean, if they gotta go do that, they're gonna go do that, and you're probably not gonna convince them otherwise. So let's just accept that. One of the worst businesses to be in is the convincing business. We want to step in front of people who already want what we have to offer, ideally. Way easier, 1,000,000,000% easier. Yes, every now and then, and maybe one of you will be the one to do it, will be the Steve Jobs that invents the iPod that never existed before, or the Henry Ford, who says, well, folks just wanted a faster, horse and carriage, right? But he invented the vehicle, the Model T instead. So that could happen. I'm gonna tell you 99.99% of the time, stepping into a pre-existing demand, way easier. Okay, so if you're in a situation that you can't offer money and someone needs it, you're not gonna convince them, just accept that. On to the next, okay? Telling a great story is a very, stories shape nations. So I would ask, how can you elevate the story that you're telling? Instead of being like, hey, I'm looking for a coder and it's gonna be very low pay and you're gonna have to like work evenings and weekends, you're gonna be exhausted all the time, wanna join? Right? So obviously having a much more compelling story, there's some great books out there. Story Brand is one of my favorite by Donald Miller. He talks all about the power of story. There's so many great stories. How to Tell a Story by The Moth, amazing book around storytelling. So I would say that. And thirdly, so we don't want to be convincing. Secondly, we want to tell a great story. Third is when I was on my back and couldn't walk, there was a book that got recommended to me called So Good They Can't Ignore You. So Good They Can't Ignore You. And this book, it basically says, the world is getting more and more global, and where we used to just compete locally, we're not just competing regionally or nationally, we're now competing worldwide. Like the world's best coder could be working on a project in India today, and in the UK tomorrow, and in the US or Canada on, next week. So with the world becoming more global, the opportunity is bigger than ever, right? The pay for the world's best coder or web designer is literally like stratospheric, okay? It's like measured in not just dollars, but equity and upside and all the rest, okay? And at the same time, it has never been harder in the entirety of humanity than in 2025 to focus long enough that you can actually become world class because of the pinging and the dinging and the political campaign here and all the madness, okay? So what I found was learning to develop deep work allowed me to get very good at a few things. Once I was very good at a few things, I could trade that very goodness with someone who had a different very good from me. So if I'm really, really good at pay-per-click ads, let's say Google ads, Facebook ads, YouTube ads, something like that, but someone else is very good as a web designer or a great product developer or whatnot, perhaps we can work together to trade services. It does require showing up with something to offer though. Every relationship starts with what's called transactional value before it can ever get to relationship value. Transactional value is like, well, what are you gonna do for me? You gotta do that a few times before someone crosses the threshold into like, hey, can I just borrow your car just cause? That's like a little bit of a bigger ask. So I think like, hey, let's just, that's okay. The world's a transactional place, especially in the beginning. When we don't have resources, we always have resourcefulness. And so whether that's time, energy, talent, connection, something else, I would really sink into what do you have to offer, because money's not the only thing. In fact, it's one of like probably dozens of things you could offer. Is that helpful? Okay, thank you. Okay. One more question? I saw a hand here, yeah?
I wonder, you mentioned the times that you set aside for yourself to deep dive on tasks and complete your work. how do you manage that personal time? How do you manage prioritize your tasks and then like allocate specific time for that? Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I developed a concept called the 7 pillars: skill set, mindset, coaching, community, tools, strategy, environment. You can take those 7 items and just do an inventory. So for example, let's take environment. What would have to be true about your environment such that you're basically guaranteed to sink into deep work or flow state or whatever you want to call it, right? Well, if you've got a TV blaring over here and an Xbox controller there, and we've got a roommate who's playing rock music, you know, next door, and it's probably not going to happen, right? So that, you know, that's like an environment item. What about tools? Did you know, this is amazing, you guys, did you know that on Amazon you can buy something called a K-safe? A K-safe is a clear box with a lock on the top that cannot be unlocked once it's locked. It has a timer on it. You open the lid, you put your cell phone in there if that's distracting, or the M&Ms, or you put the Xbox controller, whatever it is, you drop it into this clear box, you put the lid on, you dial it for an hour or a day or a week or a second, whatever you want. You cannot open it. There is no Bluetooth override, there is no key. If you want that phone or that controller, you literally have to break this $70 K-safe to get to it. So that's an example of a tool. So skill set, mindset, coaching, community, tools, strategy, environment. I would grab those 7. I would say do an inventory, and you'll come up with your customized version of basically like your lab. The best time of day, the best environment to be in, the best tools, all of it. Is that helpful? Okay, I got like an 8 out of 10, it was helpful. Yeah, how can we get to 10?
In terms of the individual tasks and how, like you mentioned, you never have enough time for everything.
Okay.
How do you pick your tasks and then like properly plan for yourself to complete everything that you want to accomplish?
Love that. Okay, two layers. Number one, I forget who said it, but like regret minimization is a great way to go through life. Maybe it's Charlie Munger, I can't remember. There's something, Cameron Herold come up with a tool called the painted pictures exercise. Totally don't worry about time, money, skill, failure, and just write down what does your ideal day look like in 5 years from now. I mean, literally, like what awards have you won? How does your staff talk about you? How do your investors talk about you? How does your community talk about you? What press have you gotten? How big is your business? How big is your team? What's your family look like? What's your personal look like? You know, what's your fitness like? What's your diet like? Like literally just sink into that 5-year vision. When I'm in a boardroom, this is actually one of the first exercises I do. So we've done this hundreds of times. It is unbelievable how much clarity that brings. And then after that, it just becomes a matter of stepping back and saying, okay, so I want to have a TV show, or I want to be on the Inc. 5000 list, or I want to have had a $50 million exit or whatever. What is in alignment with that? On a more tangible level, a guy named Tom Shipley gave this to me. He said, of all the tasks I could be doing, I imagine it's 1 year from now. What would I think today's best task would be to do if I'm in the shoes of 1 year in 1 year from now? I found that to be very, very, very useful as well. Okay. Thank you. Awesome. Good. Well, thank you, everybody. Really special to get to spend some time together. If you'd like to subscribe to the newsletter, it's truthandmastery.com. And Justin, thank you for bringing me in, and thank you to the Tsai Center for Innovation and Yale University for having me here today. I wish you all the best on your journey. Thank you so much.